All right, everybody, we're going to get started today. Thank you so much for coming and super excited to share this with you. Today's topic is going to be based on a question that's very common. And this concept is very popular for most pundits, and that is this idea that everyone should just be buying term insurance and investing the difference. And what that means is if you need some insurance to cover your unexpected death for your family, let's say you need $1 million of life insurance, however we come up with that, or whoever you work with comes up with that. And they say, well, here's the term insurance premium that you would pay to get that. And here's the whole life insurance premium to receive this amount of death benefit. And they are suggesting that since the whole life insurance premium is more for the same amount of death benefit, what you really should do, because whole life insurance doesn't produce a high enough rate of return or whatever it is, that just take the term policy and invest the money, commonly in mutual funds. That's the most popular choice, and do that instead, and you'll earn a higher rate of return. So that's the going financial pundit, financial guru suggestion by people like Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, and other people in that world quite a bit of the time. So we're going to develop this and shine some light and some truth on this with real numbers. I'm going to pull some things up. I think you'll find it very interesting. But one of the things I want to stress right here, especially if you're listening to this and you are fairly new to the infinite banking concept. The infinite banking concept, which is what we teach, is different than just suggesting someone go out and buy a whole life insurance policy. The infinite banking concept is how to use the policy. And one of the reasons why you don't see us compare whole life insurance policies and their growth, and the reason you don't see us compare the growth of a policy to an investment of whatever that would be, mutual funds or real estate or something of that nature, is mainly because when we practice banking, the policy is not treated or assumed or thought of as an investment. I want to make that stressed from the very beginning. We are bankers, and banking is all about the motion of money. So an investment is when we go out and we take some money and we pool it. Maybe we buy into this mutual fund, and the hope is to earn some interest, and we have to just leave it here. And this investment is kind of the end game. And we're trying to compare this fund to maybe some other fund or this real estate deal to other deals to see which is going to earn me the best interest rate or the best rate of return. And that's just how investing typically goes. What we're not fundamentally telling you to do, we're not telling you to stop this and instead do this in a vacuum because our interest rate is higher than theirs or something like that. Though I do believe the policies go very well, and once you understand it, and once you can see the honest truth, maybe some of your minds may be changed on just the value of the policy itself. But what we're saying is this is actually not what we're teaching people to do either. So I thought I would mention this because I don't want anyone to get the wrong vibe from what we're trying to do. What we're actually trying to do is change how we bank, do banking completely, and to where we have money go into a policy that doesn't stay there, that we then use to go do any other thing that we want, which could very well include other investments. So, and we'll expound on that in a little bit as well. But just wanted to preface this to set the stage that I am going to show you some rates of return. I am going to show you some comparisons, but I actually am not doing that to try to convince you that a policy is better than other investments. I'm actually here to encourage you to continue seeking out really good quality investments, places that you understand, that you can produce value in, that you enjoy. And we talk about that on our podcast as well. So that essentially the policy is not the investment, it is the banking tool that we're going to be using in our life, whether that's to buy a car, whether that's to buy a piece of real estate, whether that's to invest in gold, whether that's to buy Bitcoin, whether that's to invest in the stock market itself. We believe strongly that you should not see the policy as the investment. But without further ado, I will go ahead um, and share some concepts with you that I think can help shine some light to say, well, maybe these financial pundits are missing some things on the value of the policy itself. So this webinar won't really be too much, or won't have too much to do with banking itself and those strategies. We've done plenty of webinars discussing those various strategies. You should look back and review those. But what I am going to do today is show some things that I think you'll find valuable. So let me pull up this calculator here, this calculator. And what this is going to do is kind of provide us the full picture of what is possible through a policy and the real value that you're getting whenever you decide to practice infinite banking, even if you were to never pull the money out of the policy to make another investment. And so what I have here is a 44-year-old individual who's going to buy a policy. And I just chose a 30-year timeline. So starting at age 44, ending at age 73. And I want to know, what is the policy going to do inside of this as we pay premium. So I'm going to actually load up an illustration that I've already got saved here. So let me put these numbers in, load these numbers in. This is a typical policy design. This is a $20,000 annual premium policy. You can choose to start a policy anywhere with any premium essentially that you'd like to start with. This is just kind of a normal size for a lot of people, but don't feel bad if you're not there yet. But either way, so we're starting a $20,000 a year policy, paying this premium in. And after the 5th year, you'll notice our premium changes. That's actually what you'll see here is that's when we stop paying the paid up addition rider portion of this policy and just pay the base premium portion. So this is what we're seeing here. And over a 30-year time frame, this says we've put in a total of $300,000 into this policy in premium. Over on the right side in green, you have the cash value as it's increasing. And you also have the death benefit of the policy. And so one very interesting thing about this calculator, that does a very good job describing what a policy is doing. And so in the bottom left-hand side of this calculator, you'll notice that they have this thing called the internal rate of return on the life insurance cash value. Now that's a lot of words and bejumbled mess for anyone who is not well versed in rate of return calculations and financial calculators and things of that nature. So I wanted to expound a little bit on what that actually means. So what this is telling us is that if I was to take these premiums here, 20,000 a year for 5 years and then 8,000 a year for the next 25 years, if I was to go take this string of payments and put it into an investment, put it into a savings account or a CD at a bank or something of that nature, what this internal rate of return calculation is showing is it's saying, well, okay, if I was to pay this amount of money into a savings account at a bank, and at the end of 30 years, my account balance is $655,433, what is the rate of return or the amount of interest I would have had to have earned every single year on these contributions? I hope that makes sense. So what an internal rate of return is actually not saying that the cash value grew at exactly 4.07% every year, which is actually obvious, by the way. In other words, in year one, when we put in 20,000 of premium and our cash values just a shade under 13,000, I'll tell you what, you did not make a 4% quote unquote rate of return in this year. We don't even have the full amount of what we put in. But so it's not saying that you earned 4.07% exactly every year, but to equal this number, it's as if you had earned 4.07% every year for those 30 years. Now, in these later years, it's actually growing by much more than 4.07%. And in the early years, it's not doing that. But let me just kind of prove that to you. Let me go take this interest rate down to the billionth place decimal right there. And I'm going to click on this button called the alternate account. Oops. I just wanted to actually kind of clear that. If I can, just to show you what we mean. So in this scenario, once again, this is just going to assume that we're going to take the same amount of money and put it into let's just call it a savings account or investment of some sort. And if I earned 0% interest every year on this account, I would end up with just my contributions, which is $300,000 at the end of that time frame. But if I go ahead and I paste my exact rate of return, what you'll notice is that at the end of 30 years, earning 4.07% every year on these deposits that I'm making into this account, at the end of 30 years, I have exactly $655,433, earning, paying the same stream of payments as I would have made to my policy if I had chose to do this elsewhere, and earn exactly 4.07% every year for 30 years without fail. You'll actually notice that 655,433 in this account is, if I switch back to the life insurance policy, it's exactly the same, 655,433. So the internal rate of return of the policy is what is the rate of return as if we had put the money elsewhere, and it earned that exact rate of return every single year to get us to this point. We know that it's not stagnant like that in a policy because it starts behind schedule in the cash value. And at the end of as time goes on, it becomes even more and more efficient as later years come along. But it's as if we earn 4.07%. So that's where this number comes from. I hope that was helpful. If you have questions on it, you can ask me after the webinar's over, which I will have a Q&A time then. But essentially, some people look at this and they say, wow, that's great. I'm taking no risk at all on this. I get the death benefit thrown in. This is pretty good. Other people would say, well, Nate, what if I can get a higher rate of return than 4.07%? Should I put money in the policy? Remember, by the way, I'm not actually trying to convince people not to invest money, but I'm just wanting to share with you the true value of what you have. To be fair, though, if you buy this policy and you have $500,000 of death benefit, then you would actually need to go buy term if you didn't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the cost of term insurance right here. And for a 44-year-old who's going to buy a 30-year term policy, the premium is $924 is how much money we'd have to pay every year for 30 years. And at the end of 30 years, this term policy would expire. We no longer have it. But you'll notice that the difference between the cash value and the death benefit, pretty much the entire time, is somewhere around $500,000 to $600,000. You'll notice that in here. So to be fair, the person who chooses not to do a policy is going to have to buy the term insurance to receive the same amount of value, or at least close to the same amount of value that we are receiving through the death benefit of this policy. Though it's not quite the same, because at the end of 30 years, this term policy, this 30-year term expires, or the premium would be about $20,000 a year in cost. And I don't think anybody is going to want to pay that type of premium, or more. It could be 50,000. I didn't even look at it. It just astronomically high for that time frame. Whereas the policy, the whole life policy, the banking policy, we get to continue with this death benefit until we die. So there is always a value there. But assuming that we're just comparing apples to apples, you'll notice something has changed down in our little lower left-hand column interest rate, where it used to be 4.07%. That's what the policy earned by itself. But now the wording has changed. It says, what would you have to earn on that alternate account now that you have to pay term insurance premiums just to equal the policy? Well, now it's no longer at 4.07, it's at 4.49%. I'm going to copy this for us and then show you what I mean. I'm going to switch back to the alternate account. Remember, we had set on the alternate account a 4.07% rate of return, and that ended up with $655,000. Well, now that we have this new column here called term premium, now there's this $924 expense over this 30-year time frame. So you'll notice that if all we did was earn 4.07% on our investments, we would not have 655 anymore. We would only have 600,000 inside of our investment portfolio. So in other words, we have to have our investments earn more money to equal the policy while also affording us the ability to pay for this term insurance. So that's why we have to paste in this new interest rate of 4.49%, which at the end of 30 years brings us back to 655, 433. So we're still at 4.5%. To me, this feels pretty good. In today's environment, man, I'm loving it. With no risk, sign me up. But many of you know that this isn't the end as well, because inside of a policy, doesn't the account grow tax-free and we can use it tax-free? If we were somehow to find the magical savings account that could net or gross us a 4.5%, or even if we were to go find a mutual fund to invest in through a brokerage account or something of that nature, or whether maybe it's a real estate fund, whatever it is that we decide to do, there's going to be taxes on all these gains. Let me switch back to the main screen. So if we go out and we have to pay taxes on our gains, that's going to limit, or that means we're gonna have to make more money than 4.49%. So I'm going to assume that you are in between your state marginal tax brackets and your federal marginal tax brackets. I'm going to assume about a 30% tax load overall for you as an individual, assuming you can pay a premium of 20 grand, being in maybe the 25% federal tax bracket and 5% at the state level. So if we're in the 30% tax bracket and we have to pay taxes on the gains inside of our savings account that we're saving money, or inside of the mutual fund portfolio at the brokerage house that we're paying into, whatever it is, you'll now notice something has changed. The interest rate that you'd have to earn inside of a taxable asset, which is most things except for life insurance and a Roth IRA. So most things we're gonna have to pay taxes on it. You're now up at 6.4% to be able to pay the taxes and the term premium. So let me copy this and I'll go back to the alternate account to show you what we mean. Remember, back when we were earning 4.49%, which had enough to cover the term premium, we still ended up with 655. But if we only earn 4.49% and we owe taxes on the interest that we're earning over this course of time, we do not end up with 655. We end up obviously with much lower, a little under $500,000 in this account. So now that's why I have to paste in this new value of 6.41%. I've got to increase my rate of return to be able to pay the tax bill and the term premium in order to end up with the 655, 433. That's how much money the cash value in your policy is going to give you without you having to go buy any term insurance and without having to pay taxes on any of the gains you've made, whether that's while it's growing or even at the end of the time frame when it's time to retire of sorts. Now, I don't know about you, but I think it's hard to find too many investments in general that can grow at 6.41% every single year for the next 30 years without missing a beat. I think it's going to be very, very difficult. And there's definitely not a place right now in existence that I know of that you can get that without taking some level of risk, a decent level of risk. And whenever you're going to go put your money at risk, typically there's somebody out there who's going to try to make money off of you too. In the financial world, that's typically called fees, management fees. So there's no bank account that's going to pay you anything like this. So to get these types of returns, you're going to have to invest it in a place that typically is going to include fees, whether that's in a 401k, whether that's in a mutual fund, very typically, or some sort of fund where the fund managers have to be paid. So there's going to be, this is assuming that you were able to invest money at 0% cost. Well, most mutual funds have a fee. If you're investing through your 401k, then you have to pay a mutual fund fee of whatever the money's invested in, and you have to pay for the 401k management fee itself. And on top of that, if you went out and bought, if you have an advisor, then you're having to pay mutual fund fees for the cost of running the mutual fund, as well as a management fee for your advisor to give you advice and to counsel you. And so the average fee load is somewhere between around 1% to about 2.5%, just depending on the various tools that you are going to be using to invest in. But even if I go towards the lower end, if we add in a management fee of what's called like a 1% fee load, which is pretty low over the course of time for most assets. But right now with ETFs, there can be some that are lower, but especially if you want to have an advisor in your life, this should be pretty low, the bottom end of the spectrum of what it costs to invest money in a mutual fund and have an advisor. Certainly, you would probably expect to pay more than this, but so I'm trying to be, middle of the road to low middle of the road there. But all that to say, if we added a 1% management fee on this, you'll notice that something's changed. Now the interest rate on this alternate account that's going to bring us to match what you get just with your policy is you're almost up at 7.5%. I'm going to copy this real quick for us. Oop. And so now that we have this new column of management fees that you're having to pay someone, which I always find humorous, by the way, a little side note. Some people in the investment world say that insurance agents are just greedy and they're trying to make so much money on you, and the commissions are too high. I find that to be very odd. Remember, this person pays a total of $300,000 in deposits into this plan, and at a 1% management fee, look at this. Look at how much money is paid. Actually, at the very bottom, you'll notice a box that adds it all together. You would have contributed $300,000, and you would have paid this manager $82,513 to manage your portfolio. Man, that's a lot of money. I'm telling you what, on a $20,000 premium policy, let me just throw in a little guess here. Guess what? We do not make $82,513. It's laughable. It's so humorous to say that in the insurance world we make this unfair amount of money that the mutual fund world or the financial advising world doesn't make. It's actually hilarious because of how much money the fees can eat away at your portfolio, and they're so huge. It's such a huge cost that we just think, oh, it's a little 1% fee, doesn't mean much. Well, yeah, over 30 years, it's $82,000, huge amount of money. But beside the point, that wasn't the main point of this role. You'll notice that if we don't increase your rate of return from the 6.4%, if you're not earning more than that, now that you have to pay fees, you've got quite a bit less than $655,000 as your ending balance. That's why we now have to paste in that new 7.48% interest rate. So now we've kind of come to the end of the road here. We're being honest and truthful about what you would have to earn to be able to pay the tax bill that you're going to owe, to be able to afford the term premium that you're supposedly buying term and investing the difference with, and to be able to invest through the conventional marketplace of mutual funds and have to pay a mutual fund fees, which include all these hidden fees, as well as the advisor who you're working with will have his own fee. Typically the entire fee load is somewhere between 1 and 2.5%. So assuming kind of an average to below average fee load, you're looking at needing a 7.48% rate of return every single year without fail for 30 years to pay the tax, pay the term premium, pay for the guy's fees and the management fees, just to equal what your policy is going to provide for you to begin with. This is the full picture and the honest picture. Now, I think it'd be fairly rare for over a 30-year time frame. There's very few mutual funds out there that are going to produce a 7.5% return every year for 30 years, or even on an average or actual basis. It's going to be pretty darn rare. But that being said, the real question I feel like we should all be asking ourselves is, do I even want to deal with it? That's really what this webinar is about. Remember, I'm actually perfectly fine if you want to invest money in the stock market. I would just suggest that instead of putting all this money directly into the stock market, that you go ahead and put it into your policy and then borrow against the cash values to make those investments. Then you'd have two things. You'd have the stocks or the mutual fund or the real estate that you own, as well as this policy. And we can kill two birds with one stone. And there's going to be some tax advantages with being able to write off some policy loan interest expense that we wouldn't, so we can save on tax. I'm not going to go into all the detail, but I think that's the best route. But if we're really honest with ourselves, the question is, do I want to take the risk that would require me to earn 7.5% every year for 30 years just to match what my policy is going to do for me with no risk whatsoever and with full liquidity of the money at all times? I've made that personal decision for me to where I say, man, I think the chances if I just throw money in the market that I can earn 7.5% every year for 30 years to be able to pay taxes, to be able to pay term costs, to be able to pay the management fees and all these sorts of things, I just think that's going to be pretty difficult. I don't think it's worth it to me to have to go through all of that and the volatility and the ups and downs of the market. I think I would prefer just to stay steady with what my policy is giving me. That actually doesn't mean I don't invest money. I do. I just use the policies as the source of capital to do so. And I do prefer investments that are not stock market based for many other reasons. But regardless, that does happen to be the most common one. That's the one we're kind of talking about today. So with that being said, always remember that the policy is not an investment. We are only suggesting people open up policies as truly a banking tool that can help you take advantage of opportunities that come your way and find investments. Never in this entire policy's life were we ever limited on being able to take policy loans out to go purchase an investment at any given point in time and actually have two things instead of one. So I don't want you to get that impression. That's what I wanted to be very clear at the beginning, is that we are trying to tout life insurance as the best investment you can make or something of that nature. I do think it's very valuable. I think that the rate of return is actually much better than anyone has ever imagined, especially all things considered, being fair with it. But I don't want us to lose sight of the banking side, what we're really after. But man, I made the decision for myself that trying to go create a 7.5% or more rate of return in the stock market by buying a mutual fund is just not worth it for me for what I can do with my policies. And that's what everyone needs to decide for themselves. That's the main reason I shot this webinar, was just to show you, so for those of you who are listening and who are already doing banking, have policies, it's just an encouragement that really you're not missing out on much. You're not missing out on the old way, on the old world, and you don't have to regret it. And those of you who may be on the fence a little bit, I was hoping to encourage you as well that, without using the policy for banking, just the policy itself is a great asset to own, very helpful to own, with no risk, no taxation, with the death benefit to boot. So with that being said, I'm going to open it up for any questions. Any questions at all on this topic? You can feel free to use the chat bar or the question and answer bar. We have one. I am 65 now. Is it too late to start this? That's a great question. It's absolutely not too late at age 65 whatsoever. You can certainly start at age 65. I'm not sure if you mean, essentially, I guess the reason this question typically comes up is because people hear the rumor that life insurance policies get more expensive as we age. So is there an age where it's really just too late for me to start? And there's very little truth in that. There may be a minor smidge of truth, but essentially what I'm getting at is that with a policy, the reason why age doesn't matter for banking is because of the way we build it. What people are referring to is they say, well, Nate, to buy $1 million of death benefit of life insurance, you have to pay a higher premium at age 65 than if you were 35. You would have to pay less to get that same amount of insurance, of which case I would say that's correct. But remember, banking is not actually about receiving the death benefit. We are focused on cash value. So let's flip the script. Let's say you're comparing a 65-year-old and a 35-year-old. They each want to put in $20,000 a year of premium and then drop it down to 8. They each essentially want to put in the same amount of money over time. The question is, which one is going to have more cash value? The older person or the younger person? It's actually very surprising to see that at the beginning of the policy in these early years, the 65-year-old will actually have more cash value than the younger guy. And there's some reasons for that. I'm not going to go into all the details. It may be true that over 15, 20, 30 years, the 35-year-old may end up with slightly higher cash values. But the cash value side of things is going to be very, very similar. But the other thing to note is that the 35-year-old is going to have a much higher death benefit than the 65-year-old. So whereas this premium stream on a 65-year-old may produce $250,000 of death benefit, on a 35-year-old it might have produced $650,000 of death benefit. So of course the 35-year-old is going to live longer. They expect way more premiums to be paid. They can offer a higher death benefit. That's just actuarial science 101. But when we're talking about how much cash value is going to build up over time, both of them are going to be extremely similar. So great question. Certainly not too late at all. We have another question. Could you use one of these policies as an instrument to save for a dream house in retirement without taxation in comparison to an annuity or a Roth IRA? Well, certainly in comparison to an annuity, absolutely right. The Roth IRA is going to be taxed very similarly to a policy. If you can make it to age 59 and a half. Before that, you can pay taxes and penalties by early distributions, depending on how much you pull out and how much you've put in with a Roth. But as far as the taxation is concerned, in retirement, they would be taxed very, very similarly. So your question of, hey, can we use this as an instrument to save for a dream house instead of the Roth? That answer is absolutely yes. I think there's a lot of reasons why that would make sense, because if we can borrow from the policy to purchase the dream house, then you can own the dream house and still be benefiting from the policy, even though there's a loan against it. Whereas if you just use a Roth IRA to purchase that dream house, essentially what's assumed there is that you're going to make out, you're going to take out a $500,000 distribution from the Roth at age 65 to go buy the retirement home on the beach or something of that nature. In which case now that $500,000 is just gone, or essentially it's stuck in the house and it's not doing anything else. Whereas with the policy, that would bring us back to the banking side of things, which we didn't really talk much about today, but that would go back to the value of using a policy as a banking tool, as opposed to making purchases or making investments in more conventional ways. So you are right. You can definitely use a policy. Taxation would be similar to a Roth, a little bit more lenient early on, but as the older you get, once you hit 59 and a half, then it's essentially the same. But as far as banking is concerned and doing something like that, yeah, I think the policy would win every day. Yeah, great question. Great question. All right. Is there any other questions before we close it down today? Anything else? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. It was a pleasure as always. We hope to see you on the next webinar. God bless and talk to you soon. Have a great day.